Συνεχίζουμε με το επόμενο πάνελ με τίτλο και θεματική Europe Diverse and Chasing Diversity in the European Workplace for Small, Medium Enterprises and Local Businesses. Η συντονίστρια του συγκεκριμένου πάνελ είναι μια αγαπημένη κοπέλα από το γραφείο του ΚΕΑΝ, που έχει πάρει μέρος σε πάρα πολλά προγράμματα, έχει έρθει σε επαφή με πάρα πολλούς ανθρώπους και είναι μια θερμή υποστηρίκτρια του Diversity. Η κυρία Ράινα Μελισσινού, Senior Project Manager του ΚΕΑΝ.
Ευχαριστώ πολύ. Ευχαριστώ. Good evening. I would like to thank you and congratulate all participants for the nice conversation and ideas. I'm very pleased to be the first one to talk to you about Europe Diverse Europe. This project started on April 2022 and ends 2 years later in April 2024. We have put a lot of passion to implement this project that will get us closer to promoting diversity charter in small, medium enterprises in rural and remote areas where traditional roles are most prevailing. As Mirza Kazanova mentioned earlier today, the new focus of the Diversity Charter platform is to incorporate a small network of diversity charters in order to introduce equality and diversity in the workplace among small and medium-sized enterprises in remote and rural areas. Many businesses do not possess the necessary capacity or mentality to accept the benefits of adopting diversity in the workplace. Especially in rural and remote areas, small and medium enterprises lack the financial capacity or have limited knowledge on issues of diversity and equality in the workplace. Driven by traditional thinking, so far, diversity charters have been embraced by small, medium, and large businesses in most European countries. In Greece, mostly large enterprises have signed the diversity charters. Similar trends can be found in countries like Lithuania, Cyprus, and Ireland. So, today we are pleased to have with us Anna Sintru, Rugil Trumpet, and Maria Hegarty. Anna Sintru is Project Manager at the Center of Social Innovation, CSI, and Manager of the Diversity Charter Cyprus. Maria Hegarty is the founder and Managing Director of Equality Strategies and also the founder of Diversity Charter Ireland. And Rugil Trumpet is the CEO of Diversity Charter Lithuania and a public policy expert with more than 20 years of professional experience in the fields of inclusiveness, transparency, and accountability. Thank you, Maria, Anna, and Rugil, for traveling to Greece and to have here to be with us today. Welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, so my first question is for Anna. We already know that Cyprus, along with Greece and Ireland, are among the countries that have insufficient progress in reducing the gender pay gap. Do you think the problem is bigger at small, medium enterprises?
Just want to check that there is, like, you can hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great,
yes.
thank you. First of all, Raina, thank you so very much to Kian for hosting us today, for having us over, and for giving us the opportunity to present our project here in Greece. It is a great pleasure to be here, and thank you to all of you for staying, even though we are past our conference time. And it's also a great pleasure that we're all here again with physical presence, and that we can all again finally meet face to face. So, having said that, now to your question. The short answer is that unfortunately we don't have any concrete official data by which we will be able to measure this. You know, what we can do is speculate, and we can speculate based on our experience as professionals in the field. of diversity and inclusion. What I can say out of experience, what we hear from people that we work with, is that women's labor to this day remains undervalued, and that women's salary is still, in many countries, especially in countries like Cyprus, where you still have patriarchal stereotypes are very prevalent, women's salaries are still seen as complementary to the salary of the man. So even though we do not have the official data to back it up, we do know that this is the case. Now, the specificity with small and medium-sized enterprises is that in opposition to bigger companies, is that, at least in the case of Cyprus, bigger companies in Cyprus tend to be branches of bigger international companies. So with these companies, of course, what you have is the international policies of inclusion and also the international policies of equal pay for equal work, which is not the case, of course, with the smaller, medium-sized enterprises.
Thank you for that. Maria, small, medium, and medium enterprises, SMEs, represent 90% of all business in the European Union. How difficult is to map the current situation?
Sorry, is that on? Maybe try this one. Sharing mics, it's dangerous. I suppose that's why this project is exciting, because one of our first tasks is actually to map the situation for SMEs in the countries, the 4 countries of the project. But the first thing, I suppose, is it's very important to recognise that large 99% of employees are in SMEs in Europe. It's a very important thing to recognise. Diversity charters, while we have focused on larger companies, the impact on smaller companies is that they become aware of it as well as a result. And that is a positive impact. But for smaller companies, they're very diverse. The legal definition in Europe is less than 250 employees. So that's anything from 10 to 250 employees. And those are very different types of companies in terms of just size, but also with regard to sector. So companies will be service providers. So their biggest concern, obviously, is addressing the diversity of customer needs so they attract and keep their diverse customers. Other SMEs are actually in the manufacturing, the technology sector. So there's a huge range of companies in terms of size, in terms of sector, but also in terms of type. So more and more, you'll hear people talking about startups. They're the sexy companies, you know. And startups, in fact, a lot of startups that I've worked with would say, oh no, we're SME, but we're D&I to the core. But then when you ask them about their processes and their procedures, oh, we don't need those. So how do you review? How do you monitor? How do you check? No, but we're great. We're startups. So, and then you have older companies, sometimes family-run companies that are in SME sector or that are SMEs, and for them sometimes it's not until something happens. Like often I will get called into a company, an SME, when usually a father, his daughter experiences discrimination at work and he doesn't understand how this happens and he doesn't want it to happen in his company. So that's when they ask for advice and help in terms of addressing the issue. So I think the project is very, very important because the Commission are very supportive of working with SMEs. It's a huge area in terms of where people work. So we have a big job to map it.
Yes.
But it will be good because we have differences culturally, economically, and we have similarities. So I hope anyone here who wants to participate will join us. But I think mapping will be good, will be a good exercise.
Yes, of course. Thank you very much. Rugil, I want to ask about age discrimination, experienced by both younger and older workers, and tends to be the most prevalent form. What is the situation in SME in Lithuania?
Good afternoon, first of all, and thank you for having me here, and for everyone most motivated who are still in the room, my gratitude. So that's a very good question, a difficult one. Definitely age discrimination is a challenge in Lithuania, like elsewhere. In fact, this is the second largest group of complaints that the state receives. It doesn't mean that this is the biggest problem, because, for instance, when we look at the complaints the state receives from LGBT community, there are only a few. Not because that the problem is not there, it's just because of the fear and stereotypes that are still very strong in society. Complaints about discrimination based on your gender identity, it's 0. Just because in Lithuanian laws, such ground of discrimination doesn't exist. So on one hand, I'm really glad that we have a large number of complaints when it comes to age discrimination, because it means that people are already feel confident that they may raise those concerns, and they hear companies communicating that they care about age diversity. So that's a good thing. When it comes to companies, and small or large, in fact, no matter what we hear, that companies do not question whether it's necessary or not. It's the agreement that age diversity is a value. The question is how we achieve it and how we ensure it. We have quite a lot of examples from small companies when they recognize and when they already publicly say that, you know, our team is very young, we've done something wrong, and we do not know how to attract talents that are of senior ages. We had one small company very recently who came to us and said, they admitted, in fact, that we didn't hire senior people because we had this prejudice that once they are qualified for pension, they would leave our company. And this is a very, it's not a startup, but a company founded by young people. But when they had those young people in their team, they saw that the turnover was very quick. People left. They were still searching for themselves professionally. And then when they started hiring senior people, they stayed because they had higher loyalty if they appreciated that company, if they felt safe, and etc. So for them, it was a discovery. So to answer in a few words, that age diversity matters, companies admit that, but very often they do not know how to achieve it.
Thank you. I want to ask Maria, the Irish government have been called on the support a new gender quotas bill that promotes to establish a 40%, right, quota for female representation on company boards. Do you think something like that could be effective at SMEs, for SMEs?
Well, I think in terms of the actual legislation that may come down the tracks, it's on foot of the EU directive on women on boards. Currently, in its current state, that directive refers only to companies and listed companies over 250 employees. So, but the European Parliament did include an amendment, or try to get an amendment in to review it to include other companies. And like all things for large companies, listed large companies, when they start to introduce the practice, because there will be punishment if they don't achieve the objectives, it will, I suppose, create a culture of understanding that gender diversity improves decision-making. We all know all of the reports after the 2008 financial crisis. The groupthink in boards was a problem. So diversity in boards is quite critical for effectiveness of decision-making, better performance, inherently listening to all perspectives. So while SMEs may not be required to act on it very quickly, it will come further down the tracks. But the Parliament also, just to warn the bigger companies that are here, also reduced the term time by which it has to be introduced. So there's only a couple of years to get 40% of women on boards, so you better go out and find the women for the boards. In terms of what larger companies can do, though, for SMEs, there's also the growing practice of including diversity clauses in procurement policies. So the state sector can do that. Larger companies can do that. They can have targets for diversity-led SMEs as suppliers. So suppliers can become, noticed by promoting what they're doing around diversity and inclusion. So there's a number of ways that it's very important that SMEs promote what they're doing around diversity and inclusion.
Thank you. Rugil, traditionally, rural and remote society are more closed and suspicious of issues of diversity. How difficult do you think is to change their beliefs, and how can we do it through this project?
That's a good question. So like a moment of honesty. In September, like last month, we sent a newsletter that, because now we have this opportunity to offer consultations for SMEs in the regions and in the rural areas about diversity. So we sent an invitation to random companies that we have no contact with. They're not in the network of our members, just outside the bubble. So out of 40 letters, invitations, emails that we sent, we got one answer.
Okay.
And then I thought, wow, Rugile, that's a failure. That's a total failure. And but later, after a couple of days, when we had conversations with companies and when I just gave a second thought, I realized that those companies, they work with diversity. They have refugees, for instance. They have already hired them, but they do not use the same vocabulary. When you talk about diversity with them, they would say, what? They know what diversity is as a word, but when you say diversity in business or diversity management, that would be the second what? So then I realized that they really care, to some extent at least, about equal opportunities at work. They are obliged, because of our legal regulation, to ensure equal opportunities for everyone, but they just do not see themselves as working with diversity. And when I realized it, I just understood that there is so much in our vocabulary, and then when using the jargon, we might just not get in contact with people and companies that would be interested, but we just need to find the way. So I'm very optimistic about the project and what we'll do. I just now realize that we need to find the way how to contact them.
Okay, thank you. Anna, SMEs usually do not have HR departments or a strategy to implement the diversity and inclusion. How difficult do you think is to accept diversity?
Okay, that's a very good question. But allow me to begin by saying that, well, we often say that DE&I policies shouldn't only fall on the shoulders of HR departments. That's the starting point.
That's right. Yes.
And we often repeat that. And by saying that is also to take away the excuse from smaller and medium-sized enterprises that, well, you know what, we would love to be part of this, but we just don't have the resources for it. We need to understand that when we're talking about the implementation of diversity, equity, and inclusion policies, we are essentially talking about, well, a word that I've heard repeated at the conference today, but we are talking about culture. You know, you want it to be part of the culture. You don't want it to be the concern only of the HR department. So to make it more concrete about our project, perhaps what we are trying to achieve is to go to these small and medium-sized enterprises where they have no HR departments and who perhaps are also not even familiar, as Rugile said, with the terms per se, even though they might be diverse or inclusive to some extent, but they might not be familiar with the terms, and this is where the diversity charters then come in. Also, maybe to fill in this void in small and medium-sized enterprises and the lack of HR departments.
Thank you very much. Thank you all to be here. Thank you.